Hey guys, thanks for watching my channel. Today I want to talk about reading the water without electronics. You know, at 77, I don't really need a screen to tell me where the bass are. I can read the water. I learned how to do that a long time ago, and I still do it. And I have a lot of the equipment, a lot of the electronics that these guys, so many guys use, but I know that I can read the water without it. At 77, I've been fishing a long time. And you know, I got buddies that their boats look like a NASA uh, spaceship. Screens everywhere, forward-facing sonar, side imaging, down imaging. I half expect one of them to say, "Houston, we have a bass," and I'm not knocking it. And here's the truth: I learned to bass. I learned to find bass before electronics could tell me where they were. I learned from my dad. I learned from Buck Perry, and I learned from fishing tournaments and from guide trips that I've done for the last 25 or 30 years. But today I want to talk about, really reading the water without electronics. And it doesn't matter if you're 70, 80, or you're just tired of staring at a screen, because the lake still talks to you. You just have to look and you have to listen. Start with the wind. It's your free sonar. The wind tells you more than a graph ever will. Wind pushes plankton. And guess what? Plankton pulls bait fish. Bait fish pull bass. You know, it's the same anywhere you go. Doesn't matter if you're up in Ohio or you're down here in Florida. It's always the same. If I pull up to a lake, the first thing I look at is which banks is the wind blowing into? Where is the wind funneling? Is it blowing into a point, a pocket, a grass line? Wind-blown banks concentrate life. Calm banks, they're pretty, but they're usually dead. And you know, like most of you, I probably fished those dead banks thinking that looked a little easier to fish than the bank that was receiving all the wind. But I found out pretty quickly there just weren't any fish there. At my age, I don't chase the whole lake anymore. I let the wind narrow it down for me. Here's another thing: watch the birds. They're better than electronics. If you want to find fish, just look up. The gulls diving, there's probably bait. Are the herons standing on the bank? There's probably something in there moving. Are the ospreys circling? That's dinner swimming down below. Birds don't waste a lot of energy. If they're focused somewhere, take a chance and check out what they're looking for. At 77, I trust the birds more than I trust the batteries. Read the bank like a blueprint. Every shoreline tells a story. And here's what I look for: hard bottom transitions, sand to rock, irregularities in grass. There's little pockets that come out and go back in. That's where the fish will hold. Points that stick out just a little further. Docks that sit on the first drop. Reeds that are in a small pocket by themselves. A lot of times there'll be a fish holding right there. Bass like to relate to the edges and the changes in the bottom structure. Even without electronics, you can feel bottom transitions. You can feel them with a jig, with a Carolina rig, and with a simple Texas rigged worm. That's where the graphite rod really excels. The more sensitive the rod, the more you can feel, and it telegraphs back to you what's actually on the bottom. When it goes from soft to hard, you just found something important. I don't need a depth finder to tell me. That's probably a shell bed. Uh, it'll make a difference. It'll make a huge difference if you just pay attention. My dad used to say, take a good look at the shoreline. In most cases, the bottom, the way the bottom slopes will follow what you see on land. I found this to be exceptionally true in the northern lakes, where you have kind of a hill that runs down into the water. That will generally keep going at the same pace. Here in Florida, you don't see it quite as much because our land is a little more level, but it'll still give you some idea of what to expect under the water. You need to see that difference, and looking at the shoreline will help you a great deal. The current is everything, even on the lakes. Most people think of currents only in the river, but that's not true. On lakes, the current comes from the wind, it comes from the release of water, it comes from boat traffic, and it comes from narrow channels. Often it'll come from where water moves, because then oxygen moves. When oxygen moves, bait gathers. Where bait gathers, bass don't live very far away. In 77, I don't run 60 mile an hour anymore. I idle. I watch. I become an observer. I notice how the grass leans with the water flow. I notice how debris drifts. That's what tells me where the fish are and where the fish should be anyway. Shade is an ambush point. Shade is part of their highway. Early morning, look for the first long shadows. Midday, go to the docks and the bridges. Afternoon, tree lines on the western bank. Bass don't like bright light. They can handle it. They don't have eyelids. I mean, they can handle it. Sometimes you'll see them swimming out on the brightest day of the year. But they'll usually try to find shade. Shade provides an ambush point. Sun does not. They've always done this, and they always will. So look for those shady areas. Look for those areas that could potentially be an ambush point. And I don't need my electronics to tell me the depth if I know the season. Pre-spawn, points near the spawning flats. Spawn, protected pockets. Post-spawn, the first drop outside those pockets. Summer, the deeper edges and offshore structure. In the fall, just follow the bait. Wherever the bait is, that's where you're going to find the fish. In the fall, the fish put on, the feed bag, getting ready for, getting ready for the staging of the spawn. And in the winter, steeper banks and vertical structure. If you know where they're supposed to be and you know what they're supposed to be doing, you eliminate 80% of the lake almost immediately. And at 77, eliminating the water is more important than covering the water. So slow down and listen. When you fish without electronics, something amazing happens. You pay attention. You notice the way bluegill pop near grass, the sound of shad flicking, the subtle swirl that wasn't there before. The bulrushes moving more than they might move from a brief amount of wind. You'll see them move because a fish is bumping into them or trying to knock the bugs off. You can feel the bottom composition with the bait you're fishing with, and you can sense the depth change just by paying attention to your bait. You can count your bait down, 1001, 1002. This is a great way to know exactly what the depth is. You can fish without the electronics, and you can easily sharpen your instincts. Instincts don't need charging. For years, people used to ask me how I check the depth. And I showed them pretty quickly. I just take my fishing rod and I turn it upside down and point it down until I hit the bottom. Because half the time, 3/4 of the time, I'm in pretty shallow water. And so it's usually anywhere from 2 to 4 feet deep. And I don't need a depth finder to tell me that. The truth at 77, the truth is we get older. I'm not against electronics. But here's what I've learned after a lifetime on the water. Electronics can show you where the fish are. Experience tells you why they're there. And if you understand why, you can find them anywhere. even with a simple depth finder, even with no screens at all, you still are going to struggle to know why the fish or the objects are there that you're seeking. At my age, and the age of a lot of folks that have done this for a long time, if you can really get by without the electronics, you're going to know why the fish are where they're at. At 77, I may not run as fast, I may not cast as far, but I can see more than I ever did because I'm not staring at a screen. I'm reading the water. Someday the batteries will die. Someday there will be a screen glitch. But wind, birds, shade, structure, current, and seasonal movement, they'll all still be there. And if you can read them, you'll never be lost on the water. Not at 77, not at 87, not ever. That's it, folks. If you can't read the water, if you're totally dependent upon electronics, you've got a lot to learn. Electronics can be a big aid, a big help. They can really support your fishing effort. But take the time to turn them off. Go out on the water and just learn how to read the water without the assistance of all these fancy electronics. You'll be glad you did. Thanks for watching my channel today, folks. I appreciate it. And, if it's still early enough in the day and you have some time, grab a boat and get out on the lake. You'll be glad you did. Thanks for watching.